So for every player, this journey begins by forgetting who you are, having the experience of being separate from everything, having the experience of being defined in this point that exists behind the eyes, encased by the body, that perceives through its five senses, and what it perceives are other objects, and everything in between is non-existent. From the perspective of this amnesia that creates the separation, causes the experience of being separate. And in it there is the felt experience of doing, choosing, being the thinker, being autonomous. And out of that is born the experience of good and bad, right and wrong, likes and dislikes, what is desired, what is feared. For the idea of me, this separate entity that is independent and alone. But in the grace life which all of you have been offered, there lies this recognition that there is something aware of the body. And what is aware of the body is not defined by the body. It is not a doing, but it is the feeling of being. And out of being there is awareness. In this feeling of being that is aware, there is the recognition that when it is simply felt, it is recognized to not be in a point of location. And then there is what is called the world, in which the character that had been defined as who I am appears. But when you are resting in the feeling of being, you realize that this feeling is independent of the play of the world. It is unchanging as opposed to constantly changing. And then there is the role of the world that can be received from this clear space of seeing. And the nature of what was called the world is discovered to be this three-dimensional movie show that is this roadmap, because it is constantly reflecting the state of your awareness. And there are two elements to this. One is what is called karma, which are the factors that created forgetting. When this aspect appears, there is the very strong habitual tendency for this beingness, awareness that is ever present, to contract into this point of reference, driven by the conditioning of desire and fear that has been made manifest from the experience of being separate. Out of this arises the experience of choosing and doing. And when there is identification, the play of karma is in operation. But when the identification becomes a self-reminding mechanism that there has been forgetting, contraction into the habit by latching on to conditioned desires and fears, then it begins to become a fuel to let go of the habit of conditioning. When the habit of conditioning is let go of, you realize that the beingness that has always been the nature of your very existence is untouched, is already whole. The nature of this is complete love. And then you can receive the wisdom and grace of the beloved, the wisdom and grace of what is animating itself. And what its role is to free all of the habits of this amnesia that you in fact are separate, responsible, do things wrong and do things right, need to improve, and on and on. What is discovered when you are resting in what is everywhere, because there has been a freeing of the habit of this contractile tendency, is that either the character is dancing in this joy when there is no stimulus happening, which is setting off conditioning, or it feels uncomfortable and is trying. And every time this trying returns, it becomes the potential to simply realize that identification has happened again. And when identification is let go of, there is the feeling of your being, and there begins to be a recognition that the whole thing is recreating itself to free the habits that created the amnesia of being separate. So what arises at times are great intensity in the body, great tendency to contract. When the contraction occurs, it is followed by thought processes of failing. But as you begin to more and more recognize that your nature is always now, what is always now is your existence. Your existence is unaffected. The experience of choosing and doing only occurs when you have fallen away from connection with your very existence. What begins to be seen is that the separate one, while it may be intermittently experienced, it is an appearance. It ceases to be about improving myself, and the discovery begins to happen that it's all about releasing the conditioned habit of this amnesia that creates the experience of someone, some chooser, some doer, someone who is always trying. What begins to be recognized is the wisdom that is at the helm, that is bringing forth the recreation of what has caused forgetting over and over again, is that it is actually arising out of the beloved, out of the self, out of the belly of God, holding the potential of feeling into from where it is coming, as opposed to latching on to conditioned habits of me, my struggles, my wrongdoings. You begin to see that when that identification returns and all of that is playing, this may be the experience, but in truth there is no separate chooser. There is no one who has made a mistake. The identification is the constant self-reminding mechanism. There need be no struggle to get out of identification. There is the recognition there is no one who is a doer, who can do anything. But free will lies in the surrender, releasing the conditioned experience of choosing and doing, recognizing that everything is coming out of this divine wisdom that is recreating all of the steps that cause the amnesia. What is discovered is there really is not a separate, independent entity that is disconnected from the source of totality. Thus, every player is being played either as a celebration of self-recognition or a repeat of what has caused this amnesia. You begin to see that when the character is angry or upset or fearful, there begins to be a seeing, this really was never mine. It is appearing and reappearing until the receiving of the wisdom is deep enough that there is a recognition that it is actually the beloved, reorienting, bringing forth the possibility of bringing consciousness to that which has been unconscious. It ceases to be about particulars. Particulars are extremely relevant from the place of forgetfulness. There begins to be a seeing that there is a divine wisdom that is orchestrating everything, that every single thing in the world is either opening your heart or it is replicating internal psychological responses that have always been there, often lying dormant, but arising when the stimulus is such that it sets off the mechanical patterning. But that the whole manifest expression of it is arising from God in order to free this amnesia, opening the potential of taking the seat of pure divinity that you truly are, where you always have truly been. there begins to be a recognition that nothing comes into manifest expression that is out of alignment. If there is reactivity, there is something that has been skirted over. And out of this wisdom, the play comes to bring this up for the potential discovery that you cannot find from where it is coming. That there never was anything wrong. That there is no one to become awakened. But there has been amnesia creating the experience from that someone of trying so hard. It is about seeing through the amnesia as opposed to that which has forgotten attaining something. The seeing through the amnesia lies in the humble receptivity of every single thing. If it brings up a challenge, it is the divine wisdom offering the deepest work. It is not someone separate's work. The work lies in just surrender into God, into the self, into the source from where it is coming. It is not seeking that experience. It is simply surrendering into the source from where the experience of being in distress and separate again is coming from. And what begins to be noticed is the more intense the fire that happens for the separate character when this surrender is in place. In its wake, there is a deeper and deeper taste, because in the surrender of what caused the amnesia is burned away. The mind is incapable of knowing what is in its best interest. It is driven by forgetting, by this numbing, by this hypnosis. But you can know what it is that is in your best interest, and that is receiving the beloved, which is every single thing all the time. And this becomes the doorway into a love affair that cannot be described, into a sense of freedom and liberation that cannot be described. And it does take everything, because the impulses, when things are going in opposition to the conditioned desire system, there is such a strong impulse to fall into the doing mode and to try to fix. But God does not need your help. There is nothing out of alignment. It is receiving the grace as opposed to forgetting who you are by disconnecting from the nature of your very existence and then being driven by the habitual karmic patterning. Eventually, the experience of doing falls away. The eternal taste of being can no longer be left. Why? Because it is the inherent nature of who you are. And then the reflective dream becomes this dream of love and harmony, a reflection of connection. And at the rare times where issue arises, there is a recognition, this is exactly what I need, because it is bringing up something dormant that can only be released when it is received. It can only be received out of the truth of who you are. The truth of who you are is eternally present now and not defined. From this you can feel the wisdom of the source from where it comes. In this, additional layers of potential identification are unraveled, and the taste just goes deeper. Everything conditioned mind has feared will arise, otherwise you cannot be extricated. Everything conditioned mind believes it needs will be taken, because otherwise you cannot be freed of the habits of conditioned mind. It is all in the wisdom. It is all in the grace. It is all in the perfection of that with which you are completely immersed within.
What really fascinates me and what motivated me to come up here is to ask you to tell me a little bit more about what you meant when you said it doesn't need to be a struggle. Because it is that struggle that I referred to earlier that up until yesterday I realized had become that battle. The initial inclination is to struggle against the challenges.
Yes, it's what is conditioned in every mind. So this is what is pointed to when it was spoken that there does not need to be the struggle. There is an amnesia built in a belief that you are the doer of the deed, that you are the thinker of the thought, which is what leads to the positionings and the actions. But in a moment when there is a stopping, just a stopping, and the stopping is rooted enough that it becomes possible to watch thoughts arising, what can become very obvious because it is the nature of how it works is there's not someone who decides to have a certain thought come up and then it comes up. The thought just arises, and the thought leads to emotion, and out of that so many other thoughts, and it motivates actions, and all of that is coming out of an amnesia that says you chose the thought. It's you. You are the thinker. As soon as you stop and you are real, meaning you are present, not distracted from what is present into a story of who you are, but you are present without a story, then you get to see over and over again that these thoughts have no chooser. They are pre-conditioned, and the external play periodically stimulates these preconditioned tendencies over and over again. And as soon as they are touched, there is the return of the experience of being separate, the experience of doing, the experience of conflict, the experience of struggle. Now, there is a very deeply rooted belief that if I do not do it, it will not get done. But the I that believes he must do it is a phantom. It is experienced as completely real every moment the attention has been pulled from what is real, which is what is present. So there is this idea in the mind that if you are not in relationship with the thinking mind, the body will sit idly like a vegetable. But this is all contrivance. The seeing when you are resting in your nature is that the separate, independent individual is a myth. Simultaneous with that seeing is the seeing that the beloved, the beauty, the wisdom is orchestrating all action. The thing is, when you are identified as the separate one because you have pulled away from the relationship with the beloved, then what drives action are conditioned, egoic, habitual tendencies. When you are resting in who you are, what drives action is pure synchronicity. It is the beauty and the wisdom that is not less efficient, it is far more efficient.
That's where I want to go.
Yes, it's where everybody wants to go. It is living the life of pure beauty. And it is only always now. It's not plugging it into a future situation that arises out of the myth that you are independent from God. When you have the experience of being independent from God, you're going to struggle. It's the teaching, it's the wisdom. It's not the independent one fixing the struggle, it's realizing that the struggle is appearing because you have pulled yourself from the source of pure benevolence. And then you struggle. And then the struggle becomes the reminder. And the mind's fear is, if I am not engaged with the mind, who the hell knows what will happen? But the question is, what do you want? Do you want the familiar cycling around? Or do you want the beloved? Do you want immersion with God? Do you want freedom? I can guarantee you that every action that arises, even the actions that are so filled with the sense that I am doing it, are no different than the circulation of blood in the body. If you believed it was your job to circulate the blood in your body, you could be guaranteed you'd have high blood pressure. There is a role to what seems to be arbitrary, and it is the roadmap home. And the roadmap will reflect effort and tension and struggle and conflict every time there is forgetting. And beauty and peace and wholeness every time there is letting go and surrendering. You know, there are two things at play. One is the content, which makes sense to the mind. It's very important. It creates a bridge, an understanding. But what is happening on a deeper level cannot be explained, but you can feel it. You sit here and you can feel something you cannot define. It is because the words are not coming from the mind. They look like they're coming from a point of reference, but in fact they are not. They arise from the wisdom and the beauty, because the life has been surrendered. And that is when heaven reigns in everything. And you are left just feeling the love and the beauty inherent in every single thing, even what the mind may have interpreted as something that is awful. You get to see that it is all the veneer. The key is the hunger. When the hunger is so strong, it is the only hunger, then it cannot be stopped. But it is a process, because the habit of this amnesia, it runs so strong. It's like the senses say that this feeling that is so alive is coming from this point of reference in this chair. But if you really just let yourself feel it, what you feel is it's everywhere. The feeling of what is, the feeling that is now. The feeling of your own existence, which is the same as the soul. That which has never been shackled, has never known a need. And when conditioned mind comes up with its needs, the work is not a doing trying to get what I need, but the work lies in remaining still and beginning to see more and more deeply that these sensations and emotions and thoughts are arising out of the wisdom which is freeing the hypnosis, which only can occur when you remain still, not the body remaining still, but the attention at rest, which is everywhere, and that which is everywhere is not in motion. And the intervals when the fire comes burning and the mind goes into its interpretive response that something is wrong, this is when the greatest potential arises. To receive the grace that under this hypnosis was believed to be me. not to run from based on fear and attempting to access anything, but receiving the wisdom from where it is coming. Remaining still, seeking nothing, receiving God in all of its flavors. All perfectly orchestrated to set you free.